So one of the limitations of Expo historically was Expo Go, because that's basically what it was. So Expo Go is this sandbox environment that has all your native APIs, native capabilities in there, and then you just write JavaScript, just accessing what's already in this Expo Go library, Expo Go bundle. But the problem is, if you want to access anything outside of it, then you're stuck. You need to get yourself out of this Expo Go sandbox and then go the plain route. And that's why, last time when I was here, when I was doing this course, there was so much back and forth. So should I use Expo? Should I not use Expo? Because of this limitation, and people still had this fear of, I go with Expo and then I have to move away because there's limitations.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 19th episode of the Frontend Masters podcast. Hi, I'm Mark Kavansky, CEO of Frontend Masters, and today we have Kadi Kraman on the podcast. We talk about her journey from speaking and teaching to React Native and Expo, and it's a fun conversation, so I hope you enjoy it. Kadi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's been a while, maybe over a year or so.
It's been surprisingly long, yeah.
Yeah. So this is an interview style podcast, so I'll just be asking you a bunch of questions about your career journey and whatever. But the first warm-up question I have is, do you have any special skills that people might not know about?
Oh, special skills. So I actually really like making things with my hands. So I like doing embroidery and cross stitch and kind of knitting and crochet, that kind of thing. So I tend to listen to audiobooks and crochet or do some cross stitch when I want to relax. It's kind of like mindfulness.
So what's the last project that you made?
The last project, I actually made a sweater. It's like this striped sweater, and it's made of baby alpaca wool and mulberry silk.
Wow.
So it's incredibly soft. It's literally, when you look at it, it looks like it should weigh a lot, but then you lift it up and it's like a cloud, and it feels like wearing a cloud as well.
That's amazing. That's a perfect thing to do, because you can't really go out and buy it, or if you're going to buy it, it's going to be exorbitantly expensive. Yeah, one of a kind.
To be honest, yarn is actually really expensive as well, so it wasn't cheap, but there was a lot of fun making it.
How about something absurd that you love doing?
Something absurd that I love doing. I really like, I guess, tidying or organizing things. So I guess it's not that absurd, but it's one of those things where okay, say that you had this massive jar of coins, 10 years of just change that you've tossed in the drawer somewhere, and you need to sort it out by hand for some reason. I would love doing that.
That's amazing. My basement is an absolute mess, my work area, and it's I go through and tidy it once, but then it just gets in chaos. Do you have any tips
to keep it in order?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
how would you go about it, or whatever, if it's something that you enjoy?
Well, I have a label maker.
There you go. I should get a label maker.
So there's this game, this is related to tidying, but there's this game, it's called A Little to the Left.
Okay.
And it's all about that. To be honest, there's a little bit of a mix of puzzles, but it's a puzzle game. And you, the most popular kind of puzzle is where you literally have a drawer of mishmash items, and you need to pick them up and put them in the right spot.
So this is a video game?
It is a video game, yes. God. And then when you get into the right spot, it goes so nice. Maybe you should play that.
Yeah, okay. Get some tips from the video game. Tips. All right, cool. So what's your background? Where did you grow up?
I am actually from Estonia, so my whole family's from Estonia. They're still in Estonia. I was the one that flew the nest, so to speak. So I lived there, studied there. I went to university in Estonia for about 2 months. And it was one of those moments where I realized that I made a terrible mistake on the topic that I chose.
Oh yeah, what'd you start out with?
Sociology.
Okay.
Which I think it is interesting, and I still find it interesting, because sociology is basically psychology applied to the masses, which is interesting. But it wasn't really challenging. My favorite topic or subject at school was maths.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of maths in there, and it was all very like wishy-washy and like not a lot of like right and wrong answers, which is quite frustrating. So when I do a test, I want it to be like either correct or not correct, not like out of 10 to the like
prove that you put thought into this rather than
Yes.
that it's actually correct.
Yeah, and that was before ChatGPT, so you couldn't even cheat.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I was sick of that, and then I bought a one-way ticket to the UK on a whim and went to university in Birmingham instead, where I studied mathematics.
And like, what was your first kind of exposure to code?
That was actually in university. So in the maths course, we learned C++. So it was second year. And actually the way that you learn C++ in the maths world is the first, I think it was first couple of months or a first semester, you don't do any code. You learn the theory. And I still remember how the instructor, she taught us memory management, and the way she did it is like she drew a box in the whiteboard and goes like, right, so, and then she drew a 5 in the box and goes like, there's 5 left in the box, and then kind of like linked around it. And then finally we got to code, and we had to code, well, mathematical things like differentials and integrals and that kind of stuff. And it really opened my mind, because I was like, why am I doing this by hand? This is amazing. I want to do this.
Yeah, my first experience actually writing code was in math, doing the problems. I learned that my calculator had a little programming language in it, which was BASIC. And I was like, well, if I could just program in the logic of the math, then I wouldn't have to do the stuff by hand, or I could have it print out my homework for me, so I didn't have to do the manual labor of like, so by actually coding the math programs, I actually learned both programming and I learned the math better, because to think through all the different steps and all the various equations and program that in, and which type of, you know, what part of the equation you actually need, the inputs versus the outputs, it was like, I don't know, it felt like it taught me math better.
Yeah. Did you ever do like program games on your calculator as well?
Of course.
That was a thing.
Of course.
It's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. I wish I still had it to this day. The first one I made was, I took apart, it was like a text-based RPG, and I just kind of rewrote it in like science fiction land, and like, so you could like upgrade and eventually, you know, explore space and stuff like that. It was
nice.
It was super, super fun. So yeah, I wish I still had it around, but yeah. And then, so I peeked in your LinkedIn ahead of time, because I was like, okay, you started, did you work as a bartender at college or during college, or?
Yeah, it was during. Yeah, so I did have 2 jobs while I was at university, because, well, I didn't qualify for maintenance loans, which, annoying at the time, less annoying now that I don't have to pay them back. But yes, so I had 2 jobs. One of them was as a bartender at a hotel bar, and then the other one was as a sales assistant at an American sweet shop.
Really?
So I actually knew about all the American sweets before ever coming to America.
Wow.
It was quite funny.
I actually love the sweets in Europe far, far more.
Yeah, we do have better chocolate.
Much better. I remember not really enjoying chocolate, because I just thought of chocolate as like Hershey's or whatever. And then when I went to Europe for the first time and I had like a
milk
proper,
chocolate. It's amazing.
I had a proper truffle. I was just like, oh my gosh, I was teleported
that's
into
so good.
like a different planet.
Yeah, but people are so passionate about specific American sweets. So we would always have people come to the stores who were just like, oh my god, you have Twinkies, and they're from this TV show and people love it, and Lucky Charms and Three Musketeers, and like they would just be like, how are you working here, and just like not be 300 pounds. I'm just like, I don't know, I don't really like these. Yeah.
So what do you think that experience taught you of, like, you know, working in front of people? I feel like probably learned quite a bit through that.
To be honest, it in a funny way, it brings me back to this tidying, because it did actually, one of the things I learned from there is how to very effectively fold boxes.
Really?
Because we had a lot of sweets, a lot of boxes, and one of the things that we did, like every single day, is we had to like take the sweets out of the boxes and like lay them out, but then the boxes that they came in had to be like folded and taken to the tip. And we only had this small trolley that we could use, which means that we had to pack these boxes the most effective way possible. So I am like, if you give me like 100 boxes, like I'm really efficient at like finding the, you know, the main box that I put all the other boxes in, kind of like breaking them apart, folding them. Yeah.
Sounds like you were made for that job. I was like, this is so much fun.
I did really enjoy that.
Yeah. And then what type of development did you do like earlier in your career? Like how did you go from, you know, school to your first job kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I actually joined this company called Tesella, and they're a scientific programming and consultancy. And so I had a maths degree. I did 1 year of computer science, but mostly it was mathematics and psychology. And they hire physicists and mathematicians and then teach them to code to work on kind of mathsy, physicsy projects. I think that was their thing. And that was my first approach into coding. It was very much into the frying pan, fire. I got put on a project straight away. I remember my very first project. It was for this pharmaceutical company, and they had this program. It was a C# like WinForms program, like a desktop application, and it was this UI for this machine that the researchers used to measure people's lung capacity.
So like VO2 max and kind of like,
I can't remember the details, but it had charts.
I'm pretty sure it was VO2 max. I'm like big into health and fitness and like cardiovascular health and stuff like that.
You will definitely be right there.
Anyways.
And this ran on Windows 7. They had these Windows 7 dedicated laptops. Wait, am I right? Windows XP dedicated laptops, that was the way around, that this run on. And they upgraded to Windows 7, different laptops, and then they put the application on and then put the USB in, and it didn't work. And then my task was to make this work on Windows 7.
Ooh.
And I still remember being in this meeting room with my then PM, where I was asked to estimate this work.
Oof. Oh no.
And we're like, I don't have even like a whisper of a frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I said 2 weeks. It did actually take less time than that.
Really?
Yeah, so the reason it wasn't working, so all I had to do is like upgrade .NET.
Yeah.
And the reason it actually wasn't working is that between Windows XP and Windows 7, the default port, the USB port, the COM port changed. And whoever coded the application didn't specify a port. They just said, use the default port.
Got it.
And then I just added some handling for that. It was fine.
Oh, okay.
So I was a hero.
You did it. That's amazing.
I did it like a week ahead of schedule. But yeah.
And then how did you go from, that type of code to kind of like web development?
Well, this was actually, I was wanting to move to London. So this job was just outside of London, like not too much, like 40 minutes train, but it's still like far enough to not go regularly. So I wanted to move to London. And I actually posted to Hacker News. So they had this, so Hacker News has this who wants to be hired, who's hiring. I don't know if they still have it, but they did at the time, where you could just post like, hey, I'm looking to be hired, here are my skills. And then people could approach you. So I did that, and cool people approached me, some of them in London, and some interviews, and I ended up joining this company called Red Badger, who were very into React. They were the earliest adopters of React, like one of the earliest adopters of React in London, and also ran the React London meetups. So
this is probably like 2016-ish.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when React started kind of gaining steam.
Yeah, so that's how I got into both React, web dev, and just the community, because I went to every single React meetup for 2 years.
But you actually did like backend developer or development there, right? Or did you?
No, I just jumped into Frontend.
Just full on.
Yeah.
So you went from like the .NET kind of desktop programming all the way over
to... Well, so in Tesella, they did a lot of C#.
Okay.
But then my last year was actually I built websites. I used Angular 1. Hey, it was cool at the time.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was. I built an Angular website with some D3, so I'd already kind of inched towards web dev back then.
Cool. Yeah. And then after that you went to Formidable, right? And like, how did that transition go?
Yeah, well, I had a detour to a startup as well. I joined a startup for a while, which was amazing. I've never written so much code in like my life.
Okay.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And it was actually, this startup was actually the first time I worked with React Native.
Okay.
Because we had a website in React, we had an API using GraphQL, and then we needed to build a mobile app, and none of us knew how to write native mobile apps. And React Native had just recently come out, and Expo had even more recently come out, and we actually built our very first app with Expo.
That's awesome. So you were like a core contributor, early employee at a startup, and you're just building the full app and everything in React Native.
Well, it was me and two of my colleagues as well,
okay,
and
cool.
It was like that. None of us wouldn't have worked if my colleagues weren't the most ridiculous, productive people. It was like that was like the dream team.
That's awesome.
Do you look back?
This is like a
fondly?
Huge ramp up in your skills because you're just like there every day, kind of cracking at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just doing. It's just fun. It's just fun to do things. Like, I really enjoy it. Like, just the waiting around, waiting for requirements, waiting for people. I mean, it's very important. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just want to code. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those times.
Yeah, it's fun to kind of be in that cowboy mode where you're just like, all right, just slanging code.
Believe it or not, I was the least amount of cowboy there.
Okay.
There was different ranges of cowboy. But yeah, no, it was fun.
You're more organized.
I try.
Nice. And then from the startup, then you went to Formidable.
Yes, we did. And Formidable was, again, I reached out to them because we rebuilt the whole platform. I was like, my work here is done. No, I'm joking. But to be honest, Formidable was quite new into London. And I already knew pretty much the whole team there. And I thought they were awesome. And they were great in the community. And I really want to work there. So I reached out. And they interviewed me. And they actually, at the time, they really needed someone to do React Native. So even though I didn't have, years of experience in React Native, I did the React Native interview. And passed, got in, built a lot of React Native apps.
And in 5 years, you went from like senior engineer all the way to director of engineering. Could you kind of talk about that journey a little bit?
Sure. Well, what is there to talk about?
I don't know, just like, I guess you just kept getting more trust and more responsibility over time, and they started giving you...
Yeah, I mean, so Formidable was a consultancy, which means that we do projects for clients. And in consultancies, you always have this like management track and then a technical track. And initially, I went down the management track, so I was an engineering manager for 2 years there. And I decided after that I would rather go the other side. And not that I didn't enjoy like managing people, like basically I enjoy mentoring people. I think that's what it comes down to. I enjoy mentoring, helping, like guiding people, teaching them React Native, but I don't enjoy doing performance reviews and the kind of admin that comes with being a manager. Maybe one day I will come back to that. That's definitely on the cards. But right now, and back then, I wanted to be on the technical side. So I kind of detoured from software engineer to engineering manager, and then principal engineer, and then a director of engineering. And that was, it'd been a while. I delivered successful projects, doing quite well in the community. And it was Formidable was an awesome company. It definitely rewarded people for doing well. So I definitely felt looked after there.
Yeah, I think there comes a point in everybody's career, if you get to a certain level of senior, you get kind of tapped on the shoulder to become a manager or become a director, these kinds of things. And it's just like, at that point you have to choose, and yeah, it's not for everyone to take the management path.
Yeah, and once you choose it, you can also choose differently.
And that's good to know too, because I think a lot of people do take a manager job or whatever, and they're like, I don't know, like if this is right for me. And
there's also a weird thing about titles. I mean, like, you had this question to me about being a senior engineer and then becoming the director of engineering, because the title seems impressive. And in a lot of ways, like, this is true, a lot of work went into it and I had a lot of responsibility. But also it becomes kind of a handcuff. Because I remember when I went from engineering manager to a principal engineer, I had people like ask me like what happened. And similarly now, so I went from director of engineering, and now, I mean, my title I think is just software developer, which, like, is this a fall? Like, I definitely don't think it is. But we feel this cold and handcuff if we get a fancy title, that we need to continue to have a fancy title. But I am no less a experienced software engineer now than I was when my title was principal engineer.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of people, like you said, do get kind of stuck, and they're like, okay, well, I have this title and I need this title somewhere else, or else it's a fall from grace or something like that.
Well, exactly. But then the scales for titles, the levels are not consistent. Like, if only someone set the scales and then you just go to the same scale in all the companies. That is so not what it is. There's companies that like hand out senior engineer after like 1 or 2 years experience, and then other companies where it takes 6 or 7 years, and it just, the title doesn't describe what the job is.
For sure. And depends if you're at a small company or medium-sized company, large company, and only usually the really large companies have those type of roles, and there's very few of them, so it's like you're fighting for a very small amount of jobs if you're sticking with that. But that's great. And then what drew you to React Native, and why do you keep working with it and loving it so much?
I mean, I just really enjoy building mobile apps. I don't know, my phone is something that's with me all the time. Like, just all the time. Like, when I leave the house, I'm like, keys, phone, wallet. Okay, everything else is fine. Like, everything else I can like buy or look up or call someone or text someone or Google. So, like, and I think that's like that for most people these days, now that we have smartphones. Like, we use smartphones more than we use our computers, and we use them differently as well. And I just love building things for something that people can just like have in their pocket and use all the time, and just I really enjoy it. And the fact that we can reach so many people as well on multiple platforms, it's fun.
Can you talk about a project maybe that you enjoyed working on?
Yeah, I mean, two of the more recent ones, they're very different. So a big project was the Puma app.
Okay.
So I was a tech lead on the Puma app. That was my last project at Formidable. So I started from greenfield, so from completely scratch. We didn't have an app before. And we went live. By the time I left, we had 6 regions live, so millions of users. Huge app, a huge amount of effort. Our React Native team for this app started off with 3 people for the first year, which I think is brilliant. Because if you look at the competitors, Nike, Adidas, they have, tens of developers, hundreds of developers maybe. And we managed to push this out that they've been trying to do for a while. With 3 developers, eventually we went up to 5, but it was awesome.
It's got lots of great features. Small teams just can outperform really large teams because there's not like all the communication layers, and we were talking about specifications and all of these things. Like, it's just like, okay, let's get to work, and probably knew the other people that you were working with really, really well, and you could just like ship really fast.
Oh, they were brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
Yeah, just having like great colleagues like this, like when you just gel, it's just very, very satisfying to build things. Yeah, so that was one, and then the other one was actually so we built the conference app for ReactConf.
Okay.
And It's just a little app. It shows the schedule. It was a last minute addition, and it was built in about 2 weeks. Like from inception to the app stores.
That's quick.
Which is pretty wild. To be honest, it was mostly me doing the work, and as in like we had a couple of people contribute specific things, but most of like the design, UI, like implementation, actually doing the app assets, getting it to the stores, all of that was done by me.
Well, I think a lot of people throw around the term full stack, but I think you definitely did
cross stack.
Yeah, you definitely did the full stack there, like from design all the way to build.
Yeah,
That's
you know
pretty
what?
cool.
I'm trying. Like I've always been one of those people that's like, oh, I just don't have I'm not artistic. I don't have the design like gene or design skill. But the truth that we don't want this to be true, but it is, that it just takes practice. I'm by no means good. The initial designs, I'll show them to you later, that I created with are terrible. But you just need to do, and you need to do badly a lot of the times, and then you become better, and then you become good.
Yeah, I think there's like a study or something. I think it was Sarah Drasner told me about this, where they had one group that was it was like a school or something, and one group was tested on just a few pieces of art versus the other was tested on quantity. So like how many pieces they made, and the ones that like at the end of the semester or whatever it was, the ones that were tested on quantity had far better skill than the people that were tested on just a few quality pieces.
Yeah.
So it kind of bodes with just quantity doing more.
Just do it. Yeah. It's just disheartening, like doing something and just not being very good. Like I find it difficult as well. But eventually you get better.
Yeah, you just keep hammering away and
exactly.
you'll learn it. And then how did you end up at Expo?
Well, I interviewed and I got in.
Okay. Well, that works. Obviously your background in React Native and everything like that.
No, to be honest, I know quite a few of the folks at Expo already. Been to App.js a few times. I'm been increasingly impressed at everything that comes out of Expo. It's such a small company. I think people are surprised at how small Expo is. But every single person there is just so productive and so excited to build things for React Native and then make this framework the best thing can be.
Yeah, and I think Expo is like officially recommended in the like React Native docs, right? As far as like getting up and running and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So that was one of the announcements at ReactConf, and the reason actually that we built this ReactConf app as well, because so React has frameworks. So when you today were to build a new React website with React, chances are you wouldn't just like pull in React and then figure out how to do server-side rendering yourself. You're going to use a framework. You're going to use Next.js or Redwood or Remix or something like that. So that is a concept that already exists for React. So that is React framework. So you have React, the fundamental building blocks of like the tool to like, have our component-based UI rendering. Yeah. And then everything else, server-side rendering and styles and like just utility libraries, deploying, hosting, all of that stuff. The React team at Meta do not deal with it. So that's why we need frameworks. And the React Native frameworks is just the same kind of concept, but for React Native. And with React Native, so what you get out of the box is the ability to run your React code on native iOS and Android platforms. And this takes a lot of work. So we have, Metro for bundling, we have JSI, we have Fabric, we have Hermes. And that's a huge amount already to take care of. But we also have the ability to like access the native like APIs, like your phone camera or push notifications and all that stuff. But React Native doesn't come with any of those things. So you can't import push notifications from React Native. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So for that reason, React Native developers have always used a ton of community libraries. So when you do a new React Native project, you would be like, oh, I need push notifications, I need to install a library. Oh, I need to, I don't know, access the phone camera, I need to do a library. Oh, I need to display some video, I need to do a library. So it's very difficult as a newbie when you don't even know what you don't know. So what are good libraries, what work together, like what can I even do? And then that's the role of a framework. So, well, not just that. It's the libraries plus build tooling, plus building for production, building for release, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in general, like, you know, what I saw with Expo is just like, it's just really easy to get running on your device versus like building kind of natively on your.
Yeah, so
or as it evolved since I last saw it.
So what you're talking about is Expo Go. So Expo Go is part of the Expo framework, but not all of it. So one of the limitations of Expo historically was Expo Go, because that's basically what it was. So Expo Go is this sandbox environment that has all your native APIs, native capabilities in there, and then you just write JavaScript, just accessing what's already in this Expo Go library, Expo Go bundle. But the problem is, if you want to access anything outside of it, then you're stuck. You need to like get yourself out of this Expo Go sandbox and then go the plain route. And that's why, you know, last time when I was here, when I was doing this course, there was so much back and forth. So like, oh, should I use Expo? Should I not use Expo? Because of this limitation, and people still had this fear of, I go with Expo and then I have to move away because there's limitations. But a couple of years ago, the team at Expo came up with this idea of development build. Basically, it's CNG, pre-builds, and development builds. Those are the concepts. And the idea is that you can build your native apps, you can generate your native projects based on your JavaScript code and your app config. So same way that you generate your node modules with npm install or yarn install, instead of committing them into Git, you also generate your iOS Android projects.
Got it.
And then also that, together with EAS, means that you can keep the existing Expo Go style workflow where you don't have any native build environment set up at all, where you just write JavaScript, but you can also have a custom like development build which you can have any native code, which is generated on EAS, which is the Expo Application Services. So it comes full circle.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds much easier to both, kind of run it quickly or actually make your full build.
Yeah, I'm not sure I did a very good job at explaining it, but I think the idea is that the limitations that Expo had previously no longer exist. Expo Go is still the best way to get started quickly because you don't need to have the native build environment set up. And it has so much baked into it already, you can do quite a lot. But just eventually for real production applications, you would convert to using development builds. So your existing Expo Go app, you just install the dev client and then run pre-build, generate your native projects, and then you can build locally as well. You don't even have to use EAS. Or you can use EAS, the build commands, but on your local environment, so you don't have to build on the cloud. Cool.
And how did you get into like speaking and teaching in the first place?
That is a great question, and I've been trying to remember. I actually think it was because of these React meetups in London that I used to attend. I was encouraged to do a talk, and I was like, no, that's so scary. It was scary. But at the time, I wrote this little utility library for a project that I was doing. And I thought that would be a great talk. It was this little library that converted Draft.js blocks to Markdown and vice versa. So Draft.js was this little text editor from Meta. And yeah, that was my first talk. It was at a little meetup, not the React London meetup, that would be way too scary. But it was at a little meetup, and I was really scared. But that was my first talk. And then they, tended to come around every year.
Cool. And do you have any advice for folks who might be interested in teaching?
In teaching?
Or speaking at conferences, meetups?
I think just give it a go. Well, as we've discussed, to become good, you need to do things badly first, or just give it a go. So for teaching, there's a lot of opportunities for teaching online these days. So you could just start with getting ScreenFlow and just recording, or Loom even, and just recording an instructional video and upload it to your LinkedIn. Like, that is a great way to get started. See how many likes you get.
I think that's great advice. And then, do you have anything, I don't know, career-wise or personal-wise that you're like really excited about?
I'm really excited about just the React Native community and where it's going. I think there's some interesting things coming. Have you heard of React Strictum?
No.
So one exciting thing that's happening in React Native is that we're trying to make... So React Native right now is web-like, but it doesn't adhere to the web standards.
Like, view instead of div or something like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, so more and more we want React Native to be more compatible with web, to make things like, building projects that's for iOS, Android, and React Native Web, like, more consistent and more pleasant to use. So one of the things the React team and Meta are looking into is converting, using React Strictum, which basically there's an RFC for it, which you can Google and look up. But it basically means that the primitives, so instead of having a view, it's html.div, html.h1, etc. And then they would map to their corresponding elements in native and on web. There's way more to that, but this is the most visible change. And you would also align other APIs. Like, for example, in React Native, we use Flex for styling, but it's Flex with a twist. So when you go from web to native or vice versa, you'll use Flex, and it's slightly different because the defaults are different. For example, if you do display Flex on the web, the default is that you display in a row, but in native it's in a column. And there's a couple of other things, but it's just
so your code isn't going to directly translate to the web.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's some more alignment coming. So I'm not a fan of the HTML syntax, if that ends up happening, just because it makes the native app look less native, even though it's still native under the hood. But the concept is awesome. So I'm looking forward to hearing where it's going to go.
True universal app that works in all environments.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Cool. Any crazy bucket list things that are on your, horizon? I don't know, something just really fun that you want to do?
Really fun. It's not very fun, but currently on my list is I need to redo my garden.
Okay.
So I just have some grass in a garden in a shed, so I want to do a little barbecue area. And I'm trying to design, I don't know what your garden is like, but do you have these stone little yeah. So I want a little path, and some shrubbery. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we did a lot of stonework in our backyard, but we live in the, I don't know what it's like in Estonia, but we have tons of land, and so we did a ton of stonework.
Well, I live in the UK now.
Okay, you live in the UK.
I have a very small garden. It's actually like a pizza slice.
Okay.
It's like this. The problem with that is it's one of those unknown things where I've never had to do anything like this before, so I don't even know where to begin. It's do I do it myself? Do I just hire someone to do it? But I kind of want to do it myself. So yeah, need to research some.
I'm sure you'd have fun with it. Fun learning experience.
I will be good on my third try.
Yeah, that's true. Tidy the garden. Any just overarching themes as far as your career goes? Kind of something that you've always done that seems to work for you.
Something that always seems to work for me. I think. I guess saying yes to scary things. I tend to figure it out in the end, and just, I don't know, giving things a go. I think the scariest things, giving talks. I mean, giving these workshops is pretty scary. It's a lot of material to prepare and give, but it's incredibly rewarding, and it makes me very happy. when we come out from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have some amount of like confidence in yourself. You're like, well, I figured it out in the past. I'll figure it out again, right?
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. Yeah, when you're coding, that's definitely true. So I think as a junior, or I don't want to say a junior, as in someone just getting into things, you definitely have this feeling of, oh, it will never work. Actually, I had a problem yesterday. My Git push stopped working, and
Oh, no.
I know, and it was so odd, and it was only for a particular repo as well. So I could pull, I could do a commit in the GitHub UI, I could fetch, but I couldn't push. All other repos worked. You try to use HTTPS auth. I reset my private key.
Did you figure
What else
it
do you
out?
try? I did, but it's one of those things where it's still a mystery. So basically what I did is I deleted that repository from GitHub, and then I recreated the same repository with the same name, and I pushed my local repository, and then it worked. So it must have been something corrupt on the GitHub side is all I can think of. But
Yeah, I mean, software is broken all around us.
But that was definitely one of those things where I spent an hour going like, this is really annoying. I know I'm going to figure it out eventually, but I wish I wouldn't have to do this right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good takeaway. Like, try it. Like, you've probably solved things in the past. You're going to solve it again. If you say yes to a difficult challenge, like, you're going to rise up to it. So
Exactly.
I think that's a good place to wrap. So thanks, Kadi, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah. Hey there, before you go, don't forget we're new at this. So any feedback, whether it's a like or subscribe, we'll take those, or a comment about what you didn't like or what you'd like to see more of in the future. We'll definitely incorporate that into the next episodes. I'm really enjoying these conversations. So any type of feedback would be fantastic, and especially sharing it with your friends and colleagues. So really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.